Hey there, it is Faith Talk Live. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
You're watching YouTube Live or Facebook Live. There on the screen, one of our favorites, Steve Arterburn, founder and chairman of New Life Ministries, host of New Life Live. You hear that here at Faith Talk Atlanta, teaching pastor, author, and speaker. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Always enjoy being with you guys and hoping that this time it'll go better than last time.
Yes.
One thing we always love about Steve Arterburn is his sense of humor. It's always fun and just a tinge of sarcasm every once in a while.
Well, my mom said, Steve, if you can't be deep, be funny.
Steve Arterburn and also Marcus Brotherton got together and put a book together. It is out, Every Believer's Thought Life, Defeating Destructive Mental Patterns to Gain Victory Over Temptation. Good stuff. Hey, no pun intended, no brainer, right? We have trouble with our mind. It just seems it has a mind of its own in a sense. Yeah. Thanks for putting this together. No doubt with your years of experience, you've experienced with other folks, listening to them, talking to them, maybe even yourself. Tell us about the book and why you and Marcus decided to put this together.
Well, the last time Marcus and I wrote a book, it won Book of the Year. It was for kids, Kirby McCook and the Jesus Chronicles. And so we said, okay, what would be the most comprehensive, impactful book if we did a book for adults? And so since thought life is essentially everything, I mean, the Bible says that the crummy stuff that we experience comes from within. We know that thoughts will lead to feelings, attitudes, and actions. And so many folks struggle with, well, there are some big ones. Of course, lust is big, but also worry and anxiety just as big. There are people plagued with worry. But the good thing is when I've done interviews with talk show hosts who actually read the book, they loved it. And they talked about some of the deeper content. And one of my favorite things that we talk is this old pastor. His name is Chalmers, and he wrote this sermon, became quite popular. And if I can find the title of it, it's just really great. The Expulsive Power of a New Affection. It's on page 62. The Expulsive Power of a New Affection. And what he's saying is, it doesn't do any good to just stop something. Mm-hmm. You have to have a higher affection. And John Piper was responding to his sermon. He said, you have to have a superior pleasure in mind to go from dwelling on earthly things, getting caught up in the evil thoughts or negative thoughts. You have to not just stop those. Mm-hmm. You have to really want to, and you can, enjoy the freedom of a thought life that is godly, focused on others over yourself, focused with others, not just yourself. And I just think if you want a book on thought life, this is about as good as it gets. And I've done some mediocre books and some books like The Angry Man that sold to 2 people in Iowa. This one is really full of helpful content, not just the strategies on the surface, but also how do you go deeper and eliminate the source of some of our thought problems.
And you talk about in the book, reframing your brain for sexual integrity, for many things. And I think sometimes we forget it. That's not just a one and done. You don't just reframe your brain once and then it's done, right?
Well, and it's important to separate the brain as an organ versus when we talk about the heart of a person. And, the brain really does function like a very unique organ. And if you've got these pathways of always going to this thought, this pattern of it's always to the negative, it's always to defensiveness, or it's always to the worry or the lust, then, that is a little bit different than any other organ. These things, they develop. We have connections at the molecular level because of these things. So you have to be willing to do something different repeatedly, train on it for it to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
Then the other thing is, your identity is formed by those thoughts that are in the brain. And if your identity is, I've sinned so much or gone too far, God can never use me, I've lost my calling or whatever, you're not going to do much for God or with God. But if my identity is that my sins have been washed clean, white as snow, because of Jesus, and that I can live into that God doesn't see my sin, he sees me. And I never really understood that until my son made he's 16, he's great, but he made a big blunder.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would have thought that I would just be angry about that. No, I loved him, and that thing was totally separate from him.
Right.
I made worse mistakes than he will ever make. So I was able to see him love him. And that really helped me understand how we can sin, and he continues to just pour out his unfailing love toward us. And it's really sad if your thought life and patterns prevent you from experiencing that love.
Yeah.
Steve Arterburn is a teaching pastor, author, and speaker, founder and chairman of New Life Ministries. And you hear him. He's the host. He and his team on New Life Live. You hear it here at Faith Talk Atlanta. You talked about recognizing that we're washed white as snow. That's the beginning, right? And it's important for us to renew our own mind first instead of trying to fix other people first, right?
Yeah. Rather than renew your mind, you want to rewire and rework somebody else's everything. And when we bring things back, as they say, when we stay on our side of the street and we work on our side of the street, then we really have some potential for change. I've been saying this recently. I really believe it deeply. There are three things that prevent us from changing. One is that I rationalize that it's not that bad, or everybody's doing it, I'm not hurting anyone, that kind of thing. And then the other one is projection. Well, it's not really my problem, it's hers. And if she would do this, then of course I would be better. And so you project it onto them. And then the third one is just this stubborn resistance. No matter what somebody suggests, you are on the defense. You are ready to resist anything. And some people, just on the other side of resolving those three words, is a life that we call the abundant life. And if you're a Christian and you're not experiencing the abundant life or life to the full, you ought to look into those three very, very important life-killing, spirit-diminishing words.
Talking to Dr. Steve Arterburn about his new book, and also in the book, you at least talk a little bit about avoiding mind reading. And that's something that I think I know my wife and I both do. I look at her and I think, oh, she's thinking this, so I need to say this and things like that. Why is that potentially destructive?
Well, of course, I can tell that Rick's thinking, why do we continue to have this guy on right now? Other than that, I think we all do this.
Yeah.
And the less we do it, the better. And it's kind of like, it's not really mind reading, it's assumptions. We assume that this is what the person is thinking, feeling, or wanting. And rather than, and this is radical for some of us men, rather than sit down and actually talk to her and ask, well, here's what I've been thinking. Now, is that true? Or what is on your heart, your mind? To actually ask the question rather than make an assumption that's about 1,000 times more likely to be wrong. That's a big deal. That's a big game changer for a lot of us.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good, Steve. Pastor Stephen Arterburn, founder and chairman of New Life Ministries, host of New Life Live. You hear that here at Faith Talk Atlanta, teaching pastor, author, and speaker. The book we're talking about is Every Believer's Thought Life, Defeating Destructive Mental Patterns to Gain Victory Over Temptation. We got about a minute or so, Steve. You mentioned earlier about folks that thinks that they made the sin of sins and God is done with them. And no doubt there are pastors and leaders out there that feel that way.
Yeah.
And how encouraging and practical to change the way that they think this book would be, right?
Yeah. Well, after asking the question, now I've only got a minute. But but here's the thing: in the 1 Year Bible for men that I did, my wife did 1 Year Bible for women. In February, you open it up, and there's in the Old Testament passage is Aaron, God's chosen priest, worshiping a golden calf. And then at the same day in the New Testament, Peter is saying he never met Jesus. Now, you don't get much worse than that. And so you look at their lives and you say, well, did God say, okay, you blew it, I'm done with you? No. Aaron was restored, Peter was restored, and they fulfilled their calling. And I believe there are callings unfulfilled out of shame. And if you're experiencing shame over something that you did and you're a believer, what do you believe? Do you really believe that Jesus died long before you were born, long before you did anything wrong? He died for those sins. You either believe it and live into that belief, or you don't really believe it and you're living in shame.
Wow.
So good,
stuff.
Steve.
Yeah.
Every Believer's Thought Life, Stephen Arterburn and also Marcus Brotherton. New Life Live is a great place to go to. There's the book if you're watching Facebook Live or YouTube Live. newlife.com. Great place to go to. Steve, we love you. We appreciate you. Always fun with you. And we always take something away when you come on the show. Just be careful from now on with snowmobiles.
Yeah. Thank you, Rick and Dan. Appreciate it very much.
Let's take a break. We'll be right back. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
This is Faith Talk Live.